I want to bring in NBC's Mike Memoli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the vice president will speak later tonight. Joining me here in studio, Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast, former communications director for Jeb Bush's 2016 campaign, and an MSNBC political analyst, and New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, co-author of a new book about Donald Trump called Lucky Losers. Sue, you and I were just talking about the fact that I was there at MSG. You watched much of this rally. What was the big picture takeaway you had, and do you think it's a takeaway that will resonate with voters?
Well, it's interesting because this sort of seemed like maybe a bit of a homecoming for him. You know, he has so many grievances with New York City and New York State, and to come back and to do this big event meant something. But in the end, it feels like all the noise around it just has clouded what could have been something for him. Now we're just talking about all of these people that came before him and all of the horrible things that they said. And you and I were talking, I don't even think some of them we can air. They were that horrible.
Yeah, there's a big part of this we're going to talk about in the next conversation that we have. But, Tim, it leads me to the question we posed at the beginning of this segment is, why is this race so close? That's what a lot of voters want to know. And, frankly, on both sides.
Definitely on both sides. I was outside with the MAGA Volk yesterday, and I mean, they are convinced that Donald Trump is going to win. And
100%.
They don't understand
100%, yeah.
why he couldn't. And frankly, one of the most dispiriting things of the conversations that I was having was just how matter of fact the people are about believing that the 2020 election was stolen and that they are going to have to win by more to overcome the kind of fake accusations of fraud. And so that's why they're confused, right? Because they've bought into the propaganda that we saw on stage last night, that was the Tucker Carlson clip you just played. I mean, he gave a whole rant about how there's no possible way Kamala Harris could win because she's so unimpressive. And this is why he got fired from Fox for advancing these lies, are part of the reason, and why Fox had to pay $800 million. But he's continuing to do that, and the people believe it. So that's on their side. Why is the race so close? Because there's just a big part of the country that was looking at what they saw last night, and they're like, we want this. This is what we want. And I think you add that into the fact that Trump is benefiting from this remembered nostalgia of the pre-pandemic America. And I think that Kamala Harris is suffering from, there's a certain group, it's a small group, but a certain group of people that are like, 2019 was better. My groceries were cheaper. And they're not thinking about this that deeply, and they're not watching the kind of gross elements that we saw last night. And I think that he's benefiting from that.
So I think there is an element of what's happening today. But like you, I talked to dozens of people waiting in line yesterday before I went inside. And my takeaway was they love Donald Trump for the same reason they loved him in 2016, but on steroids. Can I just play, and then I'm going to ask you about this on the other side, Sue? Did you ever think anybody else but Trump?
Not a chance. The man's a businessman, common sense government. The man gets it. He knows what to do. Leave it up to him. Ask yourself, were you better off 4 years ago than you are today? The answer's clear.
Trump has been saying the same thing since the 1970s and 80s. His message has not changed. So I think that his consistency proves that he's a better leader than anyone who's run for office in the last 50 years.
Tell me what it is about Donald Trump that makes you want to support him as a small business owner.
Everything about Donald Trump.
Not afraid to say what he wants. He's not a politician, but he is for the people.
You feel you did better under the Trump administration?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, I live in Oklahoma.
And you came all this way.
Yes, I did, because
Why?
I love Trump. And he's got to take our country back, because if not, we're in deep trouble.
You're so steeped, Sue, in Trump appeal. Tell me what you, from that learned perspective of what you just heard.
I was going to start by just, before all of that, just by saying there's these one-issue voters. It's the economy, it's immigration. But when you hear what you saw, which I think is very deep into MAGA, we're not talking average voters. The people who came out are diehards. And by the way, a lot of them flew in from red states. They're not from New York.
Yeah, they're not from New York.
But to hear that he's a great businessman, and so I'm going to vote for him. I mean, Russ Buehner, my colleague, and I just wrote a book that we spent a long time on and had all of his financial information.
And found what?
And found he is not a good businessman. In fact, of course, he's here. His father, he inherited hundreds of millions of dollars from his father, who is a Queens builder famously and has a number of projects there that Donald Trump benefited from, not just financially, but Donald Trump got his start in New York because of his father's money and connections. But for the most part, he's invested both that money and the money that he made off The Apprentice, by and large, into money-losing businesses. And if people just took the time to understand, where that money went, they would see he's not a good businessman. He doesn't have the sort of know-how that could fix this country. And he had a shot at it for 4 years, and we didn't see any of it.
There was definitely a big energy at the rally. And again, because of the people who were there, these are the tried and true diehard Trump supporters. It was real. The cheers, for example, for Melania Trump, even before the former president came out, were almost deafening. But I guess you get back to the key question here, Tim, how, in a political sense, does this translate?
Well, I'm not sure it does really, with the people that they need to get. To me, this was kind of an ego exercise. It was a valedictory for Trump. The folks that you showed there in those interviews, look, those aren't even, average Republicans, really. These are the Donald Trump fanboys and women, right? Like, that's what came out last night. And when you hear those answers, they're not talking about, like, traditional Republican values, cutting taxes, right? Like, they like Donald Trump, the character, the man, right? And that's who most of the people were that were there last night. And I think it was a mistake for him to have this whole lineup of freaks come on before him and say this extreme stuff, this racist stuff. You had Stephen Miller out there, America is for Americans and Americans only. Tucker Carlson with the lies, as I mentioned. To me, that projects out to that small group of people that we're talking about, the persuadables, which are some former Republicans, these Nikki Haley voters. Yep. They look at that and they're like, that's not what I want. So to me, I think that it was a big ego exercise that might help to motivate, action from the Trump diehards to go knock on doors or whatever for the last week. But I don't think that he advanced the ball much with the broader electorate.
So, Mike, Kamala Harris is going to make her closing argument tomorrow at the Ellipse in D.C., and that, of course, is where Donald Trump rallied on January 6th. But before that, she's in Michigan. So give us sort of the big picture strategy we're looking at on that side.
Well, Chris, there's no doubt that the comments from across the board last night, the range of speakers at Madison Square Garden last night dominating the storylines today. But the vice president really wants to put a focus on the issue that has been across the country and especially in the battleground states and especially with undecided voters, the top concern, which is the state of the economy. She's starting her day in Saginaw. It's the definition of a swing county. President Biden only won it by a few hundred votes. She's going to be talking about actually in not just her own policies that she's promising for the future, but something we haven't heard as much about from her. Something that the Biden administration done, talking at a manufacturing plant that received funding from the CHIPS and Science Act as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, talking about creating jobs and what she wants to do more of. She's later going to be in Macomb County, which Donald Trump won 4 years ago, but she's going to make a pitch directly to union voters. We know how important that has been for what has been called the Biden coalition. Harris hoping to keep them in the fold in this election. And then I think it's going to be tonight when she holds a rally near the campus of University of Michigan, where we will hear her respond more to the events of last night. But we got a taste of that message when the vice president spoke to reporters just before traveling here to Michigan. Take a listen.
I think last night Donald Trump's event in Madison Square Garden really highlighted a point that I've been making throughout this campaign. He is focused and actually fixated on his grievances, on himself, and on dividing our country. And it is not in any way something that will strengthen the American family, the American worker. It is absolutely something that is intended to and is fanning the fuel of trying to divide our country.
But Harris also wants to do everything she can to demonstrate the same kind of enthusiasm we did see in New York last night. Another headliner here tonight, another musical performance tonight. It's going to be Maggie Rogers after, of course, we saw Beyonce over the weekend.
Thank you so much for that, Mike. This was, Suzanne, for Donald Trump. In getting to stand essentially on the stage, Muhammad Ali fought there, and he thinks of himself as a fighter. Elvis played there. 2 popes have been to MSG. And they weren't shy about why Trump wanted to be there or what they thought was the metaphor. Here's a couple of the people who spoke before he took the stage.
It is incredible to be here in the iconic Madison Square Garden. President Trump has been talking about this rally for years. They thought they could crush the man who built this city skyline.
The King of New York is back to reclaim the city that he built.
is going to be the launch point for the center of making Donald Trump the 47th president of the United States.
Suzanne, I want to read what your paper wrote about this. That a Trump victory next week would position him once more as the vengeance-seeking specter idling above the skyline, a keeper of federal dollars that the city needs, and of mental ledgers that he would never wipe clean as president. One of the speakers last night said he wouldn't just make America great again. He would make New York City great again. But what does history tell us about a Trump presidency and putting aside people and places against whom he might have a grievance?
Right. The rally also did feel, the speeches that I heard, like an exclamation point about New York and about how his supporters, the people on stage, viewed how liberals are running cities. There was a lot of talk about basically what a sewer New York was. And
California is a four-letter word now. Literally the way I heard it last night, used in some speeches.
Right. The other thing, and I just to fact check some of what was said last night, a lot of speakers were going on about how he built the skyline. Just this false narrative. He has a couple buildings in New York, decades ago. I mean, it's just false. It was interesting to see how they view New York. But I do feel, there's just so much. He's so about grievance, and there was just so much grievance even in the decision, I think, to do the rally. He feels he's been treated poorly by the city, by the state. And to come back here and sort of have
by the judges, by the legal system.
You can go on and on.
Yeah.
And it comes down to that. And to be able to have that rally, I think, was significant to him for those reasons.